recipe for an accessible component. I'm Sophia, a front-end engineer at Course Hero. I'm here with Karan, a senior front-end engineer also from Course Hero.
So I actually have a question for you, Sophia. When people think about accessibility, what do you think that most people have in mind?
I think that people tend to think of very visible disabilities. So when we think about like visual symbolism, it's the person in the wheelchair, it's a person with a crutch. But I think when we think about accessibility in a more universal sense, it becomes kind of more motivating. So this definition, which was kind of cobbled together from a bunch of different definitions, says that websites that are designed and developed so that every person can understand, navigate, and contribute to them, no matter their device, their circumstances, or their ability. I think that definition of web accessibility makes us realize that it's more of a universal thing, right? So maybe you don't have a conventional disability, but a website that has high contrast and clear information structure is easier to understand when you're on your phone. Or maybe if you're in a really loud environment, right, you really want those captions, even if you can hear it in normal circumstances. One thing that's interesting to know is that disability affects a lot more people than people realize. So according to the CDC, roughly about 15% of the people in the world have some form of disability, but that number goes to roughly 1 to 5 when you look at adults specifically. And there's 4 major kinds. There's manual or motor mobility, which means that maybe the user can't operate a mouse the same way that other people can. There's hearing disabilities, in which case captions are really important. And then there's like different levels of visual disability, right? It might not mean that the person is completely unable to see, but maybe they need to use the zoom function, or maybe they need higher contrast. And then there's also cognitive disability, which means that they really are relying on a really clear information hierarchy to understand where they're going and what they're doing on a website. So to summarize, why is it important? 1, better accessibility on the web benefits everyone. Again, with the example of high contrast captions, like a lot of people will benefit from that, even if they don't have a conventional disability. And then it's also the law, right? So the Americans with Disabilities Act has spurred a lot of these lawsuits related to companies missing certain features on their websites. So Hulu faced a lawsuit in 2017 because they didn't have caption support for a lot of their videos. Beyonce's website also had its own lawsuit because the website is kind of like a visual photo diary, but it was missing a lot of the text alternatives and keyboard navigation that a lot of people rely on. So it's kind of interesting to think about accessibility in React. There was a study that was done earlier this year by WebAIM, which is an organization that is considered an authority on web accessibility. And in their study, they looked at the top 1 million websites and what technologies they use and how those choices affected accessibility. And one category was frameworks, and they found that pages that use React had about 6% more accessibility errors than the average website. But this is completely preventable, right? There's nothing inherent to React that prevents us from building accessible components and websites. So we're gonna talk about how to do that by doing a demo for how to build an accessible accordion. All right, here we are on localhost with a really basic accordion we've set up.
So tell me a little bit about what you mean when you're saying an accordion here.
Well, that's a great question. So there's a lot of names for it. Sometimes it's called a collapsible section. Sometimes it's called a dropdown, but basically it's just a button that lets you toggle content by clicking on it. So let's think about the accessibility of this. One really great built-in tool that's on Chrome is Lighthouse. So that's something in DevTools that you can use to evaluate your website for things like SEO, accessibility, and also just general performance. So let's open up DevTools. I'm going to go to the Lighthouse option, and then we're just going to have accessibility checked off. And we're going to run it by clicking Generate Report. see what it says. Okay, not too bad, but there's an issue that's flagged, which is contrast. So it says background and foreground colors do not have a sufficient contrast ratio. All right, so let's see what that ratio is. And I can see the problematic element is accordion title. So let's select that. All right, it's telling me the contrast ratio is 1.97, which is not great. It doesn't pass even the minimum requirement. So we will want to fix that. Okay.
You know, one thing I did notice is this additional items to manually check. Can we take a quick look at that?
Sure.
See what it says there. Page has a logical tab order, interactive keyboard controls. Let's see, tabbing through the page, keyboard controls. I don't think we set this up on our example. Let's take a look here. Tabbing doesn't do anything. When I see something like this, the page that actually comes to mind is one of my favorite resources, the W3C, these ARIA design patterns. Let's Command F here and see if we can find an accordion. Ah, there we are. Okay, so this has a little example accordion. It works pretty similar to ours. I notice already some differences in things that are highlighted, but let's look at the accessibility features that Chrome was mentioning, like keyboard support, space or enter should open things. I like these arrow options. The tab should be there for sure. What else is there? There's some ARIA information here. I like this idea of showing whether it's expanded. There's some really good stuff in here. Cool. So this kind of gives us a little idea of what we can focus on going forward.
All right, so let's edit the code for our accordion by hopping here in Code Sandbox, which is an online editor. So just to summarize some of the issues we've noted, there's the color contrast issues, there's lack of keyboard navigation, it's the UI for focus states, and then some ARIA attributes. So let's just walk through this quickly. We have our root component, app.js, which renders an accordion, which takes in a children, which is just an array of data objects. The individual accordions are here in accordion item, and each accordion item contains a header and a body. So the header corresponds to the text up on the button, and the body corresponds to the body of the accordion. So one quick note before we start, oftentimes in React, we use a div as a wrapper when we're returning multiple elements. But if there isn't a better semantic element to use, or if we don't need a class name, which in this case we do, then we should use a React fragment, which looks like this. And the reason for doing that is we don't add an unnecessary node to the DOM, which can complicate where the focus goes. In this case, we do need the div because we have a class name, so I'm going to leave that as is. And let's tackle the first issue, which is improving the markup. So we're using a div for the button here, which doesn't really say much. So let's just change that to a button element. All right, so before you panic, obviously it's applying the default styles, hence why the button's no longer full width. But not to worry, we can override the width pretty easily with a little bit of CSS. I'm going to hop into the style sheet and just pop this here. Good, we are back to where we were before. And again, to reiterate, by turning this div into a button, we can now navigate using the tab, which is very cool. Another thing we should do is make it a little more obvious that these buttons can be clicked on, right? Because it's not inherently obvious. So a lot of times on websites, they'll add a plus or minus sign, plus meaning that you can expand this section, minus meaning that you can collapse it. We are going to be a little fancy, so we are going to use the actor selector to add some triangles to our titles. If you look in accordion header, we have this open class or conditionally rendering. So we can use that to show a different triangle when it's open versus when it's closed. I'll just save this really quickly, and we're going to add a little bit of CSS here. There we go. Now we have upside down triangle when it is closed, and then right side up triangle when it's open. And this way it's just a little more obvious that this is an element that you can interact with. So that's good. One other thing we noticed from the Lighthouse report was that the contrast wasn't strong enough. So we can fix that very easily. We just basically need a stronger contrast between the background color and the text color. So just to keep it simple, why don't we make the background white? And that should be a lot better. Okay, so we click on that. And now it is a contrast ratio of 5.74, which passes even the strictest standards with flying colors. So that's awesome. Close this vector. One other thing is a lot of people don't really like this default focus styling, this blue rectangle, but we can customize that and make it even pop a little more. If you look at the examples page, they talk about how the background color of the header button should ideally change just to make it more obvious that that's the one that's open. So I'm just going to add a little styling to the focus selector here. So now it's a little more obvious, right? We have this green outline and this pale yellow color, and it's just a little bit more obvious that it's the element we're focused on. One other thing I want to do is add emphasis on the header for the accordion that's collapsed by making the text black. Like right now, if I click out, it actually goes back to gray. So we can just add a little bit of CSS. And this way, it's a little more obvious that it's the one that's being emphasized. Awesome. So we've improved some of the things on the visual front. We also want to communicate some of this information non-visually as well. So for example, for the average person, maybe it's obvious that the accordion is open when you click on it. But for someone who's visually impaired, we want to communicate that information using some ARIA attributes. So pretty straightforwardly, we can apply ARIA expanded to communicate whether the toggle is open or not. So we can simply just set that to our is open property, which will be true or false. And this way, the screen reader knows when a toggle is open. So that's pretty straightforward. Based on the notes in the W3 site, we also want to add some attributes to communicate the relationship between the button and the text, right? For us, maybe it's obvious that you click on the button, you see the text, but for someone using screen reader, we want to communicate that otherwise. So let's add an ID, a unique ID, and also this ARIA controls property, which tells us which section it will impact. And then on the flip side, let's also add some attributes to accordion body. So ID, role, region, which just tells screen readers, hey, this is not, this doesn't fall under like a specific type of label, but it's an area that you should read out. And then also ARIA label by, which is the inverse of ARIA controls, saying, hey, the part that points to me is label index. So we've improved our UI to show the focus state better. We've added some important attributes. Now, what about that keyboard navigation?
I'm actually really excited to talk about keyboard navigation, and it's completely vital to accessibility. And as we saw, it's actually there's actually suggestions by the W3C on how to do that. So let's get started on this. Let's put this together. So let's see, how do we want to start here? I'm thinking let's start in the header component itself. If we take a look at what we have here, we can tab between stuff. We can shift tab between stuff. But the up and down arrows don't work. I remember reading that over there, that we needed to make these up and down arrows work. How about we start there? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a little on key down listener. Let's put that maybe right here on the header. So what does this do? This listens for arrow up. This listens for arrow down. This listens for escape. It's a personal favorite. I like the idea of hitting escape to quit an accordion. And what do we want to do when we have this? Let's say on arrow up, I want to scroll up, arrow down, scroll down, escape, close it. I think that's probably more appropriate for a parent component. So let's just add some stub functions here, maybe something that we will grab from the props. So something like this. Okay, I like that. I like how that looks. Okay, let's move to the accordion now. So this is probably where we're going to control a lot of this functionality. You know, I have an idea of how we're going to do this, and I like the idea of using a use effect in our child component. Let me put some code on the screen, and then we can talk through how it works. So the idea here is let's create a little state, maybe something like a focused index. And what I want to do is I want this parent to listen for these key up and key down events. It kind of knows what index of the child is sending those events. And all we really need to do is send it to the item above or item below. So we can update this focus index. And if we hop here to the header again, we can actually maybe put in a little ref here. So I'm going to put a little ref here. How about here? Okay. And this ref will actually point to this item right here. And what this ref I put in does is it checks, hey, should I be focused? You know, did something in the parent component tell me that I should be focused now? And if that changes and it's true, then focus me. Really straightforward, really simple. You can, of course, do things that are much more complicated, but let's start simple for now. Okay, so let's move in and let's start studying out some of these functions. So the first thing I'm going to do is put some little empty functions that we'll use here. Okay, so what do we have here? We're passing our isFocus, which we were using over here. We're passing our focus next, focus previous, and handle escape. Let's start with focus next. So I think it's pretty straightforward that we want to set the index to the next one. But there's also a situation where what if you're on the last accordion element? What does that look like? That looks like something like this, and you hit the down arrow. I say we should loop up. I believe I saw that in the W3C. That's very comfortable navigation for me. So let's add that here. So what did we do here? We said that if we're on the last element, we're going to loop to the beginning. Otherwise, we're just going to go to index +1. And because we are listening for changes in the focus index in the child, this seems like it should work. Let's try this together. Hey, there we go, down arrow. Oh, and it loops. Okay, I really like that. So the up arrow is pretty similar. So I'll just put in the code for that real quick. Boom. And, you know, let's test it together. Let's go here. Down arrow works. Up arrow works. That's great. And then escape, what do we want to do? This is a personal preference. I like the idea of collapsing an accordion with escape. So let's try this. I'm going to put in some code here. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to hit escape. So let's open this one and hit escape. Hey, that works. So one, this is very inclusive, right? There are individuals who wouldn't have been able to comfortably use our accordion before that now can. There are people who we are empowering. But I genuinely believe that this helps everybody. Everybody has a better experience because of this. It just feels like it feels intuitive. It feels right. It feels fun to use. It's a simple accordion component, I know, but it feels fun.
So that was our demo. Obviously, there are libraries out there that you can just download that have all of these features built in. But the point of this demo was to just show you how easy it is to make your components more accessible. So what are the ingredients? It's being thoughtful about the markup by using semantic HTML. It's incorporating ARIA attributes. It's making sure that keyboard navigation is supported, which can actually come from the semantic markup. And it's also being clear about focus management. There's a lot of great resources out there, but two that we particularly recommend are the W3C examples page and this website, which has a lot of information about different patterns. So the first one is the one that we showed during our demo, which has really detailed information about the kinds of attributes you should be using, different considerations, kind of at the element level. And then the second link kind of takes a more philosophical approach when it comes to different components. So why we can make different choices and what the implications are for those choices. So we really encourage you to check those out.
So before we close out here, I actually had a question for you, Sophia. It's been a year and I wanted to know something not related to computer science, something a little personal. What gives you hope?
That's a really good question. Yeah, this has been quite a year. I think it's two things. One thing is just how resilient people have been, both at the team level and also at the level beyond that. People have found really amazing ways to cope with everything that's going on in the world. For my team at Course Hero, we did a virtual cocktail class. I think I heard that your team did a virtual escape room, which is really, really cool. And then secondly, I think what gives me hope is how we've been able to recognize the humanity in each other. Definitely at Course Hero, but also across all of the different social circles we're in. I think being empathetic, being patient, and demonstrating our respect for each other has kind of underlined the fact that beyond us being devs, we are humans. We have basic needs and we should take care of each other in difficult times. What about you, Karan?
It's like I said, it's been a year. I think sometimes it just feels like the world might be falling apart. And sometimes it feels like there's a lot out there to be scared of. And sometimes it even feels like that feeling might never go away. But interestingly, tech represents hope to me. Tech to me is a promise that the future will get better. I learned the word doom scrolling this year. If you look it up, it's just this idea that you keep going on Twitter and keep finding more and more scary things. There's always going to be something scary, something negative out there. But no matter what, it seems that phones always get a little thinner. Computers always get a little faster. And every once in a while, something new comes out that just feels magical. In those moments, that magic can inspire a sense of wonder and, for me, hope. I became an engineer because it allows me to shape what this slightly better future will look like. And I think that we focus on accessibility because it allows us to make this slightly better future more inclusive as well. This was an awesome talk, Sophia. Thank you so much for setting this up. Thank you for having me as a part of this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for everything you shared. Everything you said really resonated with me as well. And to the people watching this talk, I hope it brought you something, both in terms of learning about accessibility, but also thinking about who we are as people.